That is the first KE Knowledge Exchange series of the Faculty of Social Sciences. And then introduce myself, I'm Paul Yip. I'm the Associate Dean, I think, for the Knowledge Exchange and Development. Okay. And then the idea when we have this Knowledge Exchange series is this to try to bridge the academics and the community. All right. So we like to have some showpiece. So the first in this the series is by Professor Danny Lam, and actually I'm sure all of you know him very well. If not, try the deep seat. Okay, that's what I did. That's what I did. So instead of I rephrasing what is written here, so I try the deep seat, and then I say, can you show me a piece and how do I introduce Professor Danny Lam for the rural revitalization? And actually, it takes 40 seconds for him to generate the result. Okay, let me try to do this. Yes, no. They remind us, please do the fact checking. So I do my fact checking, I do the correction before I came here. Okay, so let me try this, right, to see whether you agree with the deep seat or not. If not, I mean, try to correct them. Okay, so it is my honor to introduce Professor Danny Lam from Hong Kong U, a distinguished scholar, a practitioner in the rule of the rural revitalization, with a career dedicated to bringing the gap between the academic research and community action. Professor Lam has become a leading voice in sustainable and rural development, and both in Hong Kong and globally. So his work emphasizes on the holistic approach that integrated economic resilience, environmental stewardship, and cultural preservation. I love this three. I love this sentence. No. That is exactly, I think, what Danny has been doing. And so through this collaborative with the local government, NGOs, and the rural community, he has pioneered the strategies that empower the region to thrive without compromising the heritage or the ecosystem. So notably, the revitalization in the Lai Chi Wo exemplify his innovative methodologies, blending participatory design with the data-driven policy making. The project has won the 2020 UNESCO Asia Pacific Award for the Cultural Heritage Conservation and the 2021 the Asian Timescape Award by the UN Habitat. Furthermore, the Hong Kong SAR government adopt, I think, the collaborative approach and establish the countryside conservation offices with a Hong Kong $1 billion, I think, to engage various stakeholders in revitalize the Hong Kong rural area. Beyond research, Professor Lam is a very passionate educator, mentoring the next generation of planners and policymakers, and his contribution align closely with the Global Sustainable Development Goals, especially the SDG 11, called Sustainable Community, and SDG 8, and called Inclusive Growth. Actually, I teach the Sustainable Development to our students. So. Anyway, recognized for his Knowledge Exchange Award in Hong Kong University, and also the UN Award, and he continued to shape the dialogues on the equitable development. And I can't wait, to learn from Professor Lam how can rural areas can thrive in a rapidly urbanized world as in Hong Kong. Professor Lam's answer might surprise all of us. So please join me in welcoming Danny to share his insight on the revitalizing the rural future.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the DeepSeek misinformation. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this seminar. I know that, coming to a seminar after a long day of work is a challenge, but, I promise that I will keep it on time so that, I won't be in the way to your dinner. Okay. All right. But before I talk about Lai Chi Wo, I just want to say a few words about myself. Some of you guys know me, and for those who don't, my name is Danny Lam. I'm in public administration, right? And then actually many people ask me, including my father, you are a teacher and study public administration, what are you doing at Lai Chi Wo? Are you doing farming or what? What are you doing? Do you have a proper job? And things like that. So when people think about public administration, usually people think about the government, right? So we have the MPA, DPA students here, they study the government. But then to me, actually, public administration is more than the government. Public administration is about problem solving in the public sector in a way that, we are talking about how community as a whole get together to solve problems. If you think about many of the problems that we are dealing with as a society, that requires not only the effort of the government, but also other, sectors' contribution. So my research has always been on understanding, what are the factors that could incentivize and empower people from different sectors to engage in some sort of collective action, and so how people can collaborate to pursue some, social good in a way, right? So I'm a big fan of the so-called collaborative governance, collective action, right? And this is, my sort of academic approach to, understanding a lot of different issues, right? In my earlier career, I studied irrigation, I studied resource management and different things, right? And then, in recent years, actually, I have been using this kind of perspective, trying to understand, what can be done actually to facilitate or to promote the so-called rural revitalization, all right? And then, so I just want to give you guys some sort of a sort of a context, and then I talk about, what we have been doing in Lai Chi Wo, right? All right, Lai Chi Wo. Okay. All right. You guys are from Hong Kong, right? Even if you are not, I think that you, Ian, Ian has been here for long time. That you are actually a very Hong Kong person, right? And when you fly from outside to Hong Kong, you will notice that Hong Kong actually, even though Hong Kong is a very urbanized city, international financial center, whatnot, it is a very green city. It's very green. When you look out from the airplane, it's all green. If you look at Hong Kong, actually, about 70% of the land of Hong Kong is the so-called the green area. That includes many things, right? Patrick would tell us how the government people define the green, but then the thing is that Hong Kong is very green. Hong Kong is very green. It's more than green, actually. Hong Kong actually has a very vibrant ecological diversity, right? And this is prepared by my colleagues. Hong Kong, of course, has 7.3 million people, 40 million tourists every year. But, other than that, actually, we are very proud to say that in Hong Kong, we have more than 500 species of wild birds, more than 200 species of butterflies, 185 species of freshwater fish, all kind of things. So it's a very vibrant sort of ecosystem. And also, more importantly, at the end of the list, we have more than 70 villages. Right? You may not notice that, but in Hong Kong we do have a large number of villages. They are still in existence. Many people assume that, wow, it's impossible, but this is true. Hong Kong still have 700 villages. All right. Now this is Hong Kong. This is Hong Kong. And then we all know that the rural areas actually are an integral part of a sustainable society, because people who are interested in sustainability would know that the rural areas actually provide lots of what we call the ecosystem services, right? Say, for example, it provides the so-called ecological diversity. It provides services on climate change mitigation, adaptation. But more than that, actually, it also provides lots of what we call the social economic capital, the resources that can be used for production, economic activities, or whatever, right? But then also, I think the third point is very important. The rural areas are also what I call the cultural repertoire that actually store the tradition, cultural sort of attributes of society, right? So, say for example, in Hong Kong, we do have a lot of Hakka villages, right? Those Hakka village actually, is embedded in the rural areas, right? So you can see that, the rural areas actually is a very important part of Hong Kong, even though Hong Kong is very urbanized. But the rural areas actually play a very important part, for a sustainable city, okay? Then, Hong Kong is very green, but then the question is, okay, how come actually? Patrick is here. Actually, Patrick is the director of the planning department, lands department. So Patrick will know more about the former. Okay, whatever. But you have the knowledge, right? And he will know better about the policy underlying the protection of the so-called green area, right? But one of the very important policy tools in protecting the green area, the rural areas in Hong Kong, is the Country Parks Ordinance. That we have the Country Park Ordinance that stipulate a particular areas of Hong Kong, about 40% of Hong Kong's land, to be the so-called country park, right? And areas within the country park actually are subject to a lot of, should I call them restrictions? That there are lots of things that you cannot do in those areas. Say, for example, if you want to have some construction or whatever, you need to get approval, all sorts of things, right? And in a way, this kind of policy, I think, is a very effective policy to protect the green area from over development, right? But having said that, if you think about it, I'm not sure that you guys enjoy hiking or whatever. If you take a hike in the rural areas in Hong Kong, actually, one thing that you would notice is that you sort of see a lot of abandoned villages. That you see a lot of structures, houses or whatever. You see the sort of the structure of the villages, but you don't see people. You don't see people, right? It's very green. The villages' houses may be somehow not protected, but they're still there, right? But then you don't see lots of people, right? Most of the villages actually have been abandoned, right? People told me that actually it's similar to Singapore. Singapore is that there are lots of trees, but there are no birds, right? So in Hong Kong, we have a lot of green area, a lot of abandoned villages or whatever, a lot of country houses, but no people, right? So the reason, of course, is what? Is that, we have the Country Parks Ordinance that actually stipulate a great piece of, green area to be the country park, in which a lot of restrictions for development, economic activities, right? But then they have the concept of the enclave, meaning that those villages that are located within the country park, they are called enclaves because they are surrounded by the country park. So you can imagine that it is very difficult actually to make a livelihood or make a living in those villages because it's surrounded by the country park, and in the country park area there are lots of things that you cannot do, right? So as a result, it's a very interesting sort of situation. So on one hand, a lot of land, green areas is preserved, the houses still there, but on the other hand, no community. No community. I mean, people enjoy hiking, taking a hike, visiting those villages, but no people, right? Now, this is the kind of situation that we have been facing. Right? But then then it came the question of, well, given this kind of situation, the very fundamental question that started our project was that, are there any other alternative ways of revitalizing villages or the rural area or protecting the rural areas without actually preventing the community from developing, from thriving, right? So this is the challenge that we are going to we were facing actually, particularly we call it the rural revitalization in the peri-urban context. That the rural areas that are at the outskirts of the urban area, which have been affected, by urbanization, on one hand. But on the other hand, it's very important to preserve those rural areas. So what, how are we going to deal with that? What can we do, right? So this was the basic fundamental question that started our whole effort in Lai Chi Wo. Okay. Something I'm not sure you have been to Lai Chi Wo. Lai Chi Wo actually is a very nice village in the northeastern part of the New Territories. It is closer to China than to Hong Kong in a way. That if you go there, you take I don't know. There are different ways actually. The way that I usually do is that we take the bus, all the way to the close area at Shuttlecock. Right? You need a permit or whatever. It's easier nowadays. You can get a permit, and with that permit, we can take a speedboat, 15 minutes, and then you go to Lai Chi Wo. Right? Now, of course, when you take the speedboat, of course, you see that Yim Tien. If you look at the Shenzhen size, it's highly urbanized, right? And then you look at the Hong Kong side, it's very rural. So it's a very surreal kind of feeling that, when you go there, right? But anyway, this is a very nice uh, intact village in a way, because maybe because it's so remote that, for some, somehow it's very well preserved, the physical structure, But one thing is also very important is that the social structure of Lai Chi Wo is also quite intact in a way. Now, I'm not saying that the villagers are still living there, but the village as a social structure still exists, right? Now, a majority of the Lai Chi Wo people actually have already migrated to Europe. I think most of them actually, in the UK, in Europe, about 20% or something, who are still in Hong Kong, they don't live there. They live in, different parts of Hong Kong, right? But the social structure is still there, meaning that, there's still a village, sort of some sort of governance structure. They still elect their village representatives, all sorts of things, right? So it provides very good site for us to really study, to try out some of the ideas that we have on how collaborative governance can enhance rural revitalization, right? Okay, and what else is about Lai Chi Wo? All right, before 2013, the time we went to Lai Chi Wo, the village was totally abandoned, meaning that, no people were living there, and then the fields were all abandoned. As I said, you see the structures, but no people, right? So that is where we started. All right. And then when we started the project, of course we are academics, right? So we pretend that we have some theories or whatever. We do. But then we thought that, okay, why don't we, the literature, and what theories talks about, what kind of insights can we get from the literature, before we started the actions, right? So we adopt the so-called social ecological system framework, right? Now, I'm not sure this is actually a very simple framework, but actually this framework I think it's very useful because it provides a lot of insight. Instead of going into the details, there are a couple of points or arguments of this framework that I want you guys to pay attention to, right? The first point is that this framework says that the rural areas actually is what they call the social ecological systems, meaning that in the rural areas actually both the ecological system and social systems are operating in a very integrated way, meaning that it's not like the ecosystem they operate alone, the social system they operate alone. They're mutually affecting, right? So say for example, in the good old days I studied irrigation. Now I'm not sure you guys had visited Taiwan. Right? Taiwan is very interesting because if you look at irrigation in Taiwan, in the southern part of Taiwan, you will see that actually the irrigation in Taiwan is so well planned that they have a huge network of canals, and actually delivering water to every inch of the land in a very particular way, right? They use this kind of system because what? Because in those southern part of Taiwan, they don't have a lot of water. Rainwater is very little, and they have big reservoirs. In order to fully utilize the water, they need to have a very meticulous system, right? And then, in order to have that kind of system to operate, they design a very sophisticated rotation system or whatever, right? So this is the kind of integrated sort of operation that we are talking about. That on one hand, in terms of resource operation, the resource, it has a logic, but the logic needs to be complemented by the operation of a social system that support the operation, right? So this is a very important point. I think it's integrated. And the second point is that that this system, this framework talks about is that these systems, they are embedded within one another, that they are like different layers of systems, that they are mutually affected, right? So the village, of course, is a village. Of course, it's a village, but the village is embedded in an alliance of villages. The alliance of villages may be embedded in the broader, jurisdiction or whatever. At each area, there are sort of, interrelationship across different scale and across different jurisdictions. Now, this is another very important point, particularly when we look at the system from the so-called collaborative governance perspective, that, they are related, right? And the third argument, made by this framework is that, given the complexity, it has a lot of what they call the non-linear dynamic. What is non-linear dynamic? Now, usually when social scientists, they talk about linear relationship. When we have one unit increase in x, 5 unit increase in y. But then this is linear because the relationship is constant, right? But given the complexity, the relationship is not linear, meaning that, you change a little bit of this, maybe a lot of cascading effects, a lot of things that could actually mess things up. So this kind of thing is very important, this kind of so-called nonlinear dynamics. So instead of managing the system, we are talking about harnessing the system. Harnessing system is like, I keep saying that it's like, you play the soap bubble. The soap bubble is, you just harness it. You don't try to grab it, because you grab the bubble, it bursts. Right? So it's the kind of thing that, when you're trying to revitalize the rural areas, you are not saying that I come in and do something and change it or whatever. It's like, it's not like fixing a machine. Instead, the dynamic is so complicated that you have to be very careful. And, you need to know what you're doing and what are the unintended consequences. Now, that's very important. That's another thing I think I like this approach a lot. And the last one is that given the complexity, when we look at the performance of the system, we should look at robustness instead of particular performance measure. Now, what is robustness? A very good example is flying a plane. Robustness means what? Means that the system can maintain a certain degree of functionality even under disturbances. If you're flying a plane, one of the engine breaks down, it can still fly. The other engine breaks down, it can still fly. Right? I don't know until how many engine breaks down. But anyway, it provides some sort of robustness in a way. Right? Now, this is very important because the concept of robustness is very different from a very static concept of performance. Now, recently we know that there's huge wildfire in California, right? Why? Why? Think about it. The way that they have been managing the forest is that they try to prevent wildfires from happening, right? So they try to make sure that there are no wildfires. But if you look at the system, the forest, from the perspective of robustness, actually, you should actually allow some small fires happen, so that it would actually burn some of the biomass, right? So as to maintain some sort of low-level biomass that, when big fires happens, it will not cause too much damage, right? You can imagine that, if you keep saying that, no small fires are allowed, no small fires are allowed, then the biomass will accumulate, and at the point when there's a fire, that would be disastrous, right? Now, this is the difference between the concept of robustness, that we are saying that, we need to focus on how to maintain the system, the basic functionality of the system, so that it could be resilient to disturbances, instead of, looking at one or two performance measures, how many trees have been burned or things like that. No, robustness, right? Okay, all right. And then, with this very nice framework, and we then identify the conditions that could support robustness, right? We, from the literature, we said that, okay, there are 5 conditions that may support the robustness. The first one is that you need to have a system that is able to generate and apply different solutions at different scales and levels. Meaning that you need to have a very smart system that, in different places of the system can come up with solutions or possible solutions, right? That's important. Second one, the system needs to have the so-called early problem detection, that they need to know what happened, so that there could be some measures to deal with that, right? The third condition is that, the system should be able to remember successful solutions, right? You have some successes, and then you need to have some sort of mechanism that allow the system as a whole to remember those solutions, right? Now, this sounds to be very abstract, but, any organization has this kind of institutional memory, right? In different forms. Here we are saying that, if this is very important, we need to make sure that the system, the rural areas, the institutional arrangement would have the mechanism to remember the successes, right? And the fourth one actually is similar to the third one, that, if it's possible, we need to turn those solutions into institutions, into rules, so that, those solutions actually could be preserved, could be modified, could be applied in the future, right? And finally, because of the very nested nature, because different systems are embedded within one another, the kind of system that we want is that there are both localized and non-localized institutions, right? There are lots of localized institutions, meaning that people are involved. They would need to be able to, try to participate, resolve problems, but at the same time, you need outside sort of institutions that support the operation of these localized institutions, right? Now, these are the conditions identified by the literature. We are not, we are not geniuses, but the literature says that, if you want robust system, you need to make sure that you have these 5 sort of conditions, right? Okay. Now, this framework provides very good sort of foundation for us to think about what we can do, to revitalize the villages, the rural areas, given that the rural areas are what we call a social ecological systems. Okay, all right. So, let's get this. And then, in order to attain those 5, conditions, we came up with a lot of strategies. We did a lot actually. I'm not going into details, but anyway, we have 5 big strategies that help the system to build robustness, right? The first one is co-management. We have capacity building. We have what we call the cultural continuum, community economy, and the rebranding. And for each of these strategies, we apply the strategy in different aspects of the villages, right? So landscape, ecology, agriculture, social economy, community. So these are sort of a manual that we came up, in order to try to revitalize. Now notice that this manual is based on the ideas that I just talked about, that, we want to build robustness in the system. Now let me talk about this 5 strategy one by one, and then I hope that I can explain a little bit clearer. The first strategy is what we call the co-management. Well, actually, there's been a very fancy term of it. They call it the co-creation. Co-creation, right? Now, what is co-management? Co-management actually, as I said, that because revitalizing the rural communities requires a lot of efforts from different sectors, different organizations, right? You need to make sure that the participation of these different sectors or actors organization becomes the essential part of the operation, right? Now, there are different elements of the so-called co-management. The first element that we had actually is to sort of to rebuild the village community, right? This is important, right? But what do you mean by village community? Now, this is very tricky. Instead, as I said, that most of the indigenous villages have already migrated to, Europe, and of course, younger generation. If you ask them, okay, why don't you go back to your village to do the farming? They will say no, right? So instead of actually rebuilding this kind of the very old sort of traditional sort of village, we are talking about rebuilding a community of interest. Meaning that, we are talking about how to engage people and to build the sense of ownership in these people so that they are concerned about, or they are willing to participate in the activities of the village. So the village is no longer those people who live there and do the agriculture every day. It's not that. We are talking about a community of interest. Those people who feel strongly about the importance of the village, those people who are passionate, those people who are actually want to make contribution, right? Now nowadays, actually, the residents in Laichiwo actually are not that many. We are talking about more than 10, less than 20, I'm sure, the regular residents. But actually, there are lots of people who regularly engage in the activities of the village, right? There are volunteers. There are different groups who constantly organize activities in the village. And there are different groups who take it very seriously, but they don't need to be living there in the village, right? Now, of course, we recruited some new villagers. Of course, there are some people who move from the urban area to the village, to be part of the community, right? So the whole idea of the so-called co-management, of course, the first component is to how to create a community, how to create a community. The second thing that we did, with this co-management, of course, is to try to engage different sectors. Now, this is easier said than done, right? So everybody will say, okay, why don't you guys collaborate? Why don't the corporate sector make contribution? Why doesn't the government make contribution? Well, ideally, yes. But then, each of these actually actors, they face very different challenges and constraints, right? Say, for example, if you want the government to be a major pusher of this revitalization, they have a lot of concerns, right? Now, I have to be very honest. At the very early stage of this project, the government actually didn't really want to get involved that much, and they began to get involved when they saw success, right? And they saw, wow, well, there's something good, and they began, right? Is it, Patrick? Is it the government logic? Of course, right? Right? Gain credit. Yes, gain credit, right? And there are also, the corporate sector, say, for example. The corporate sector, they have their concern. Even though they are very interested in CSR or whatever, they need to ask themselves, is this something that they should do, right? So the thing is that we need to engaging different actors. Actually, we need to understand their motivation, preferences, incentives, and try to create this kind of complementarity to make sure that, if you are not good at doing that, maybe I can do that, right? Say, for example, a very important role to university actually is to create the platform so that different people, different sector, they can actually come together, So different actors have different roles. And this is a very tricky part that, when we talk about co-management, we need to create a sense of ownership, but with the recognition of the constraint faced by different actors, right? And we did a lot. So you can see that we have lots of meetings or whatever, in case the NGO, Patrick runs, all sorts of things, right? And also we constantly we engage different groups, to the community work and everything, right? So this is for the co-management. The second strategy is what we call the cultural continuum. Now, the cultural continuum is more than maintaining the culture. This, we are really talking about how to enhance the governance of the local community. Because, at the end of the day, when you go to revitalize the village, you are not doing it by yourself. Instead, think about it. If you go in the village and you tell people that I'm going to revitalize your village, without the people's participation, you are not doing the work. And it is very important to make sure that, people, the villagers, they are able to govern. By governance, I mean collective decision making. They should be able to make decisions, to resolve conflict, to make sure that they can participate, right? So we actually, and of course, the local governance actually is a very integral part of the culture, right? You can imagine that, local governance, of course, they talk about culture, tradition, the traditional way that they do decision making and things like that, right? So one of the things that we did was that, we sort of not to teach them how to govern, but to harness them. And everyone who has the experience of dealing with the country, indigenous people, would know the challenge. That you want to harness them, and you need to sort of make sure that they know what they're doing, without really telling them what to do, right? So this is again very challenging, very challenging. But then I think this is the idea of the harnessing that it's like and then we did a lot to help their how to strengthen the local governance. So there's another long story about their governance structure. But then the thing is that we try a lot actually to not to assist but to encourage them to enhance local governance. This is very important, which actually is a very integral part of the culture of the village, right? And the third strategy, of course, is to have what we call the community economy, right? Now notice that for any village to be sustainable, to be revitalized, it needs to have some sort of resources to sustain itself, right? When you ask a group of people to live in the village, the first thing that they will ask you is how I'm going to make a living, right? what can be done, right? So creating the source of economic revenue is very important. But having said that, uh, we have to be very careful because here we are talking about two very important sort of delicacies, right? The first delicacy is what? Is that, uh, sometimes, now I'm not sure that you guys are aware of it. My colleagues who are ecologists actually just told me that agriculture is very bad for ecological diversity. Because if you farm the land, you need to clear out all the other species or whatever to make sure that it is very, I don't know, suitable for farming of a particular crop, right? So the thing is that when if we only think about, okay, why don't we introduce agriculture to create economic income, we might actually ignore the importance of ecological diversity, right? So in doing that, actually we were very careful, right? In Laichiwo, I'm very proud to say that we have the largest coffee field in Hong Kong, right? I'm not sure you have tried Hong Kong coffee, but we do produce coffee, very pricey, and right, and good coffee, right? Good coffee. We have the largest coffee field in Hong Kong. Why coffee? It's very simple. Because what? Because coffee is the kind of crops of what they call the agroforestry, meaning that to grow coffees, you don't need to cut down the trees. Instead, you can keep the trees on one hand to maintain the diversity or whatever, and then on the other hand, you can grow coffees to earn economic revenue, right? Now, this kind of idea that we are talking about, how to maintain the kind of things, right? Another very important thing about community economy is that it is more than economic development. We want to make sure that the economic activities would support the development of the community, right? Not purely economic revenue. We are saying that because we are talking about how to revitalize the village, the community, right? So economic activities should serve the purpose. We need to make sure that it serves the purpose of growing the community, right? So when you visit Laichiwo, you will know that there are lots of farming groups. Those are from the local people, and and also the activities. We make sure that it has some sort of uh, empowerment functions for the villages, right? So, say for example, we have been very cautious about ecotourism. We are a little bit concerned about the ecotourism may bring in too many tourists that might actually create problems. So this kind of thing that we need to carefully balance, right? That is the important thing, right? And of course, well, we actually, other than agriculture, we set up a small workshop in Shuttlecock that actually manufacture the agricultural produce into processed food. So we're all sort of produce, all sort of products nowadays. And if you are, I don't know, if you're interested, actually you can purchase some. Not very particularly cheap, but very good quality, very good quality, right? And of course, we have done also a lot of things, like the farmers market, everything, to make sure that it has the economic livelihood at the same time that can support the growth of the community. All right. Or capacity building. Capacity building, actually, there are two levels, right? We try to build the capacity of people who are directly involved in the management of the village, and through different means, other than technical know-how, we also actually give them opportunities to have collective decision making, all sorts of soft skills that would be important, right? Say for example, because there are different farming groups in Laichiwo. Actually, we set up a lot of so-called platforms, so that different groups can come together to make collective decisions. That requires a lot of learning, right? Because sometimes they have very different interests, and they need to learn how to resolve conflicts or whatever. That is capacity building, right? But another level of capacity building is in the social level, in the society's level. That we set up the so-called academy for sustainable community, and we harvest the knowledge of what we've done into training programs, and then we offer the trainings to people in the community who are interested. So we do have a lot of courses that are available for people to people who are interested in it, and also this kind of program actually, as I said, help preserve the knowledge that we gathered, right? Think about we are not really. I think I keep saying that one thing that we are different from NGO they are doing good jobs, but one thing that additional thing we have been doing actually is to make sure that the knowledge part is will get harvested and be systematically stored and disseminated, right? This is the capacity building. And finally, rebranding. Now, I'm not sure this is a good name, but rebranding is not really about PR. No, rebranding is to position. It's a positioning exercise to tell the community how the rural areas are relevant to the city, both locally and internationally, right? So because when we tell people we're doing a lot of work in Lai Chi Wo, but then people say, what is it, right? And you need to make sure that you package what you've done, the knowledge, the models or whatever, in a way that people can really, register in their mind, right? And this kind of rebranding is not only for PR, it's for international, local sort of knowledge dissemination, connections, that kind of thing, right? When you try to connect with the international community, the first thing, of course, is that you need to have something, right? This is what the rebranding is about. That we want to have a Lai Chi Wo model that people can have some sort of ideas about what it is about, and then you can then communicate with the international community, right? All right. Okay, I skipped this. All right, so no, this actually is commercial time. We have done a lot. We have published a book and some articles. I'm not sure it's to the liking of the university, but we have done a lot, and we received some awards. Big ones. The UNESCO one, which is actually we represented China to get the award, and also we won the UN Habitat Asian Township Award. Because these awards all recognize the model behind the work that we have done, right? And also, there were so many awards. Okay, wait, I'm sorry. Okay, skip the award. Okay. We do also have policy impact locally, right? In the policy address in 2017, the chief executive actually used as the start of the model, as the foundation for launching a rural conservation office, rural conservation policy. So, and then Paul mentioned that the government set up a countryside conservation fund, set up a countryside conservation office, based on the very interesting experience of Lai Chi Wo. So we do have some policy impact. Now this slide is the most important, the last one, I think, that and then the question is, what is the next step? What is the next step, right? And then you guys talk about a lot of things, a lot of recognition, but what is the longer sort of plan, right? And the next step for us is how to scale up the impacts, right? Instead of focusing only on Lai Chi Wo, are we able to really scale up the impact that we have achieved, so that it could have a bigger impact, right? Now we have a lot of different strategies. Now, I'm not sure. Okay, let me tell you one by one, very briefly. This is actually, these things are what we are doing now, right? The first strategy to scale up, of course, is that we try to apply the kind of model to different other villages in the area. So you can imagine this is a strategy of replication. We try to replicate the thing in the neighboring villages, right? So we got another project called the Samlam Forest Village. So we are doing similar things in 2 other villages near Lai Chi Wo. So it's a replication. That's the first strategy, right? The second strategy is that we try to strengthen, further develop the sustainability or viability of the Lai Chi Wo project, the model, in a way that instead of saying that we have a model to help the village or whatever, we want to make the village itself to be very self-sustaining, right? So we try different things, right? Say for example, we we work with different social enterprises to make sure that maybe social enterprises may be an alternative way to create resources to maintain the sustainability of the effort and things like that, right? So this is sort of an extension model in a way, right? And also we incubate whatever. But one thing that I want to talk about is that the third strategy that we are doing now is that we are applying the model to another type of resources, right? We are now working with the MTRC to try to leverage the sustainability impact of their wetland. Now, I'm not sure you know the MTRC. When you take the train to Shenzhen, and you see that there's a huge piece of wetland, the MTRC actually is responsible for maintaining the ecological vibrancy of the wetland. But MTRC is saying that, well, ecological vibrancy is not enough. They want to have the so-called also social economic value of that piece of land, right? So what we are doing now actually is that we are conducting another study with MTRC to try to apply some of the ideas that we have, in sort of to utilize or maximize the sort of the what we call the sustainability value of the wetland, right? So other than villages, we are talking about wetland now, all right? And the final way that we try to scale up the thing is that we have been working with institutions in this area, in this region, and we have a new project called the AIRI project that we have formed a consortium in collaboration with Tsinghua University, National Tsinghua University in Taiwan, and also the Asian Institute of Technology, and together we are conducting some sort of comparative studies, and then we are trying to actually establish a database of rural revitalization projects, for a larger scale sort of comparison, right? So this project is still going on, and then and this way I think it's very important. One way to scale up actually is to really to have the idea, instead of very minor project activity. We are talking about, can we actually scale up the whole idea through this kind of comparative studies, and international learning, some kind of things, right? So it is the scaling up in terms of ideas, right? So this is the thing, okay? And then, okay, yeah, that's it. So I'm sorry I overran a lot, and welcome any questions.
June 1 to 26. Well, I think.
10 minutes, Paul.
Well, yes, we have 10 minutes. No, I think it's very important. I think I always say when we do the social work thing, we always say nothing about us without us, right? So it is typically how do you involve, I think, the local environment, I think, into the co-creation. I think the co-creation is the buzzword. I think not only in the revitalization, in a lot of social work practices as well. How do we co-create something which make the people have some sense of ownership, and then have some sort of leadership, and then to do the work. Anyways, we open the floor. I think we welcome any question, any suggestion, and then yes. And if you don't mind, you identify yourself, and then such that we know who you are, and then thank you.
Hi, I'm Gökçe. I'm just a member of the public.
It's as good as anything.
So I wanted to ask, what would be your most important takeaway from this project? If you had to pick one value that was the most important value that was generated, what would that top most important?
I think the major, very important prerequisite is the villagers' participation. Right? I think people always have a misperception that we are going to revitalize the village for the villagers. But without the villagers, you are not really doing the revitalization. And particularly in Hong Kong, people who have interacted with the indigenous communities would know that actually, if you don't get their buy-in, which actually is very time-consuming and very tricky, you're not going anywhere, right? So, and also I think the whole idea of revitalization should be community-centered in a way, right? So, if you just come from outside and make changes, what is the point?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lam, for your wonderful sharing. Sorry. I'm a PhD student in the urban planning department. I have a question about the cultural meaning of this kind of projects. As you say that this kind of creating communities in the villages let lots of people inside the village and also outside the village to participate in the cultural regeneration, also cultural economic regeneration process. I wonder if it can be strategically combining with a broader picture of the whole Hong Kong's cultural regeneration policies, like how can people outside the village or have a real relationship with the knowledge concern about why they should pay more attention to this kind of village revitalization rather than concerning more about urban regeneration?
This is a very good question. This is a big challenge, right? And as I said, one of the major things about rural revitalization is that you need to make the rural areas relevant to the city. But otherwise, people will not care. And then that, making the link between, rural areas and the city actually requires a lot of different strategies, right? Now, we have adopted different strategies. The first strategy, of course, is that, we have been engaging, different groups, in this community to the village work, right? So we invited the art groups, to go to the village. We invite different, people who are interested in, different things to join the village activities, right? And that is important, right? And the second strategy that we have been using, as I said, is that we try to harvest the knowledge, the experience into some knowledge, and then we try to disseminate the knowledge. So it's through some sort of education, and engagement, that is the thing. But of course, the bigger question is you talk about cultural revitalization or regeneration in Hong Kong.
Just adding for some excellent, I'm thinking that it's like make a unvalued space revalue again, like just adding to the space value, maybe.
No, my experience is that even though people are very concerned about rural areas, but they are very rational people. No, seriously. We need to pay attention to the incentive part very carefully, right? I like the term self-interest rightly understood, right? Meaning what? Meaning that they might be they may treasure the overall value of something, but at the end of the day, they would need to think about, okay, how is it related to my sort of different preferences or whatever, and then creating the link is very important. I mean, I said it as if it is a romantic sort of exercise, which is not. Lots of hard work, lots of conflict. The indigenous people sometimes they could be very rude, and it's not like, okay, let's do something very nice, whatever. Even though Lai Chi Wo is very nice nowadays, but behind that the work is how to resolve conflict. But I think the most important thing is to link up the interest to the bigger social good, that could be generated by the rural area.
Hi, Professor Long. I am also a PhD candidate from the Department of Urban Planning and Design. I'm working on a project that relevant to urban renewal, so it's completely opposite to yours. But the relevant theories, so I use collaborative planning. Sometimes we also discuss about co-creation, co-production, and collaborative governance, that sort of thing. I have two types of questions. So the first one is regarding communication. So when we are talking about co-creation, usually there are a lot of challenges from the stakeholders' communication. So I will be interested to know, like in your project, how do you initiate the communication? I mean, usually this is the most difficult part, to convince people and then to get people together and then get them talking. So number one, and number two is how do you like sustain this dialogue, this communication? Because usually, in my experience and practices, is usually that it's difficult to make it a long-standing dialogue, because usually, I mean, if you have a lot of issues, then it will remain unsolved. So which leads to my third question, that is how do you make a conclusion? How do you reach a conclusion from the communication and dialogue with all the stakeholders? So this is like one type of questions that I would like to ask. And there's a second type of question.
I think let's do the first.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, you have three already. What's
Yeah.
Okay, the first part of the first question is about how to start the
Right,
communication.
yes.
All right, this is actually, in Lychee Walk, to be very honest, we are very lucky. Because, Patrick, that, because, there is a group of people, Zoom and Yola, those people actually who happen to have very good relationship and very passionate about the thing. And it happens that they meet a group of people, villagers, who happen to come back from overseas, to go back to the village, want to have their retirement there. And then all of a sudden, that kind of dialogue starts. Right? Now, of course, this is, I think it's a little bit better luck. But then the thing is that, I think the trick of maintaining communication with the so-called villagers or indigenous people is that we don't impose. We don't impose. That and always I keep saying that incentive is very important. You need to make sure that they have the incentive, that you give them some incentive. Right? So again, I'm not it is not a romantic solid exercise. Right? This actually is related to a third question: how to maintain the continuity of the communication. They will continue only if they see results. Right? Now the results could be some very tangible things, benefit, but it could be less tangible. Say, for example, if you show response, which is very important. When they talk to you and no response, next time they won't come. And then you show them, okay, there will be continuous, sort of things, right? And of course, how to maintain the momentum, I think, is very important. But to me, I think you need to create some success along the way. Otherwise, they don't, they won't be next time. But actually, for your question, there are lots of commonalities between rural revitalization and urban renewal. Because in both projects, both areas, we are talking about building community. We are talking about how to energize and empower the community to engage in collective action and to help them. I think the urban renewal, they're also talking about the commons, commoning sort of practices. Actually, we have used a lot of these concepts in our
Good evening. Thank you, Professor Yip and Professor Lam, for the seminar. So my name is David, and I am an MPhil student from the Department of Geography downstairs. So I want to know more about the part of tourism, because I work on community-based tourism in the urban area in Hong Kong. So we all know that the urban area and the village area are very different, like in terms of the relationship of the neighborhoods and like the landscape. So I want to know that once in your presentation you said that when you do the ecotourism in Lychee Walk, you are afraid that there will be so many tourists that maybe bring some disturbance to the area. So I want to know more, is that because like in many literature, in doing the village revitalization, most of them they use the approach of a community-based tourism, like in the Africa or like somewhere else. So I want to know, in the case of Lychee Walk, do you find that they have some difficulties in doing the community-based tourism in there, or just the people they do not want to do a tourism there? And also, I know, please correct me if I am wrong. I know if there's like a Airbnb or like a hostel or something in Lychee Walk, I'm not sure. But if yes, can you share more about that, or do you think there are some difficulties like working on that? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. No, I'm not saying that we should not do ecotourism, but then we will do it, making sure that the community is ready. The community is ready, right? So, in a way that say, well, actually, you asked the right question, because the right person is in the room. Those very nice Mansuk, actually, are run by Heritage, right? And then remove, and then it is a project done by the Countryside Foundation, and they got some support from the Hong Kong Jockey Club, to build those houses, to rebuild those houses, and then they run for the Airbnb sort of services. So this is not part of our project. This is the project of Countryside Foundation, and the key leader of the foundation is in the room. So maybe after this you can talk to him. But then what I just want to say is that ecotourism is okay. I understand that in Taiwan, in China, this is a very important sort of component for revitalization. Okay? The thing is that you need to make sure the community is ready. Right? Instead as I keep saying that you have some big some companies running this kind of thing for the village, in the village, and taking the village as a site for this Airbnb. This is not good because as I keep saying, the whole idea of rural revitalization is to rebuild, strengthen the community. Right? So any activities that might harm the community might not be sustainable. From my perspective.
Thank you.
Patrick, you want to do this? Should I?
Yeah, Professor, thank you for sharing.
Let me introduce Patrick. Patrick, please. So Patrick was former director of
LAS.
And then?
And after retirement, I joined the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation as an advisor. And the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation was actually founded by, among other people, Dr. Zhou Da, who was a lecturer or professor at the Department of Geography here in this university. It was actually Dr. Zhou Da and Mr. Lam from Chiu Ying. The two of them, they were the sort of pioneers in this move on this rural revitalization. And in the early days, actually, Dr. He went to the United Kingdom. He went to Belfast, Northern Ireland, to talk to the villagers, the village elders who have migrated to Northern Ireland. And Dr. Mjodam, at his own expense, this was all at his own expense, to talk to these key figures in the village who have settled in Northern Ireland, but who is very keen to see the continuation of Lai Chi Wall in the village. And to cut a very long story short, the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation, with some funding from Jockey Club and from the Countryside Office, the Conservation Funds, we managed to lease a number of houses, village houses, mostly disrepaired and almost collapsed. We spent the money to sort of almost rebuild these village houses. And together with Hakka Home, we call it the Hakka Home, which is also an NGO, comprised mainly of the village people. And Mr. Lam and myself, we sit as the so-called outside directors on this Hakka Home. And between Hakka Home and the Hong Kong Countryside Foundation, we run these village houses. The purpose of running these village houses, is not to sort of attract the day tourists. Day tourists are important to contributing the village economy. When the day tourist comes, they take a stroll around Lai Chi Wall, have a look at the village, and buy some village produce. But that's not the real intention of the Hakka Home and the Countryside Foundation. Our real intention and objective is to introduce urban folks in Hong Kong to the traditional ways of living and the traditional culture of the Hakka people in the village. That's why if the urban folks, they can come to Lai Chi Wall, not just to spend a few hours, because it takes you, Professor has been talking about a 15 minutes speedboat ride, but for most of the folks, you take a 1.5 hour ferry ride from Ma Liu Shui to Lai Chi Wo. So it takes you 3 hours just to go from Ma Liu Shui and back. So as I said, we welcome day tourists, but all the more we welcome people who would come to Lai Chi Wo, stay there for a night at least, if not for 2 days, and actually, spend some time talking to the villages there, both indigenous villages as well as the new villages, who used to live in the city, but then they fell in love with Lai Chi Wo, and then they actually stay in Lai Chi Wo. These new villages, some of them are artists, painters, some of them are retired bankers, who's fed up with the pressure of living in the city, and they want to live in a quieter place, and then to experience the Hakka way of life. So that's the main objective. That's why the Hakka home. That's why our sort of marketing point is that we want people to experience Hakka way of life, not just to come and spend a night, just as you spend anywhere else, in the village. That's not our thing.
No,
Sorry, taking too much of your time.
No. Actually, I'm just over time. So this is the beauty of Lai Chi Wo, in the way that it's not only Hong Kong view, right? There are different actors, like Countryside Foundation, There are different actually. If you go to Lai Chi Wo, you see that actually there are different organizations doing different things, right? So Countryside Foundation, they work with the Hakka Home to do the ecotourism, the Airbnb, and Hong Kong you do the agroforestry. So that is the beauty of the project. If I said it was only not Hong Kong view, I didn't make it very clear. This is a very collaborative sort of endeavor. Okay, last question. Last question, okay? Very brief one.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor, for sharing. So I'm a master student of Sustainable Leadership and Governance. I have a question of that. How do you distribute the revenue of you earned under the system? Yeah, like Airbnb, something like that, or you plant the coffee bean. And are the villagers satisfied of this distribution? Because you say the most important factor of this model is the village participation.
Okay,
That's my
that's a
question.
very good question. Actually,
So where's the money?
No, one of the challenges of the project is that, if you look at the value created by the project, there is, of course, economic value by selling coffee beans, of course, you earn some money. But there's a lot of social impact that cannot be measured or traded in the market. That there's no market for social impact, right? So the thing is that we have been struggling very hard, actually, to make the whole thing sustainable by differentiating this benefit, and then to explore different fundings for different part of this damage. Say, for example, our center actually has also set up a social enterprise, which is responsible for making the processed food or whatever, they run the kitchen. That is the commercial part, and then we earn some money or whatever. This is more like business operation. But for the other part, like public education, like the introduction of agricultural practices, those things will not actually generate any market value. Right? So for those activities, we have been exploring the donation, the funding from the government, or whatever. I think you're asking a very important question about how to sustain this kind of social impact project, right? Because the impact actually we have the so-called double bottom sort of measure that with social. Somehow the strategy that we've been using is to differentiate this and to try to explore different sources of revenue for different dams. And then I think in terms of commercial part, I think we make it work for that. We're not making big money. Don't tell anyone.
But you're not answering the question. She's asking how you distribute your revenue. Sorry, that's the only
The social enterprise that we set up actually is a limited company by guarantee, meaning that it's not a company by share. So all the money would be brought back, to the project work. We are not, we can't.
Are you happy?
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
Okay, although he doesn't allow the, but I do allow one more question. Anyone who like, okay, because this gentleman really like the word.
Okay, very simple.
Okay, my question is very simple. Thank you for Professor Lam, and I'm a student from MPA. I'm so honored to can go to the Lychee Wall in several days ago. And one of the challenges from my point of view is that whether we can have more and more people can devoted in such a good project for the the young people just like our age. So I have an idea. Do you think the TV show or TV project, TV program can be a rebuilding strategy for your project? Just what you see in the fifth strategy. So that is a very simple idea from my point of view.
TV project.
Yeah, reality show.
Actually, a movie was made on this film.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie?
Because your IP is very famous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of projects in mainland China, Singapore, and South Asia, whatever, Bali Island, they maybe attract lots of TV program come to here to let the world people to know their brand. So just like your fifth strategy, rebuilding our Lychee Wall.
No, okay. Very briefly. Okay. I think the brand. I think we're doing a good job. I need to tell you one story. In mainland China, they have a case competition for the Master of Public Administration program, national program. And then at each university send a team to write a case and then to compete nationally. Right? And the winning case last year was the team at Tsinghua. And then actually they wrote a case on Lychee. So actually Lychee was very famous, in China that everybody knows. But it's very interesting, they got an award by studying what we are studying. Right? And they didn't even interview us. That's very interesting. But in terms of
That's not right.
is that
I don't know.
You should do the submission.
I don't know.
You should.
No, but we are well known. We are well known. And but being well known is one thing. Whether people who are actually willing to take action, is another thing.
I think in Hong Kong, I mean, we're always fighting for the space to live, right? I mean, this rural revitalization, I mean, and it takes up a lot of space. I mean, and how does it strike the balance? No, I mean, there's this positioning of what does this rural revitalization? What does it mean to Hong Kong? I mean, this is a positioning here. Now, when everybody try to just build every single inch, I think in Hong Kong, I think for solving the housing crisis. But now, at the same time, we do such a beautiful land, beautiful places, and there's something I think there's some sort of good debate on this, right? I mean, if people can choose, I mean, if I choose to live over there, is there any way? I think somehow, I mean, at a policy level, I think to not compensate, it is just to facilitate. I think these are choices. I think not everybody can just live in this cramped, small spaces. I think, I don't know. Am I allowed to make this comment?
I don't have the answer. My belief is that every city needs some sort of backup. And then the question is whether you want to back up in jurisdiction of Hong Kong or somewhere else. I mean, you can imagine you can develop Hong Kong into a fully urbanized city, and the rural area will be in Shenzhen.
Yeah.
So next time you want to enjoy the rural area, go to Shenzhen. Right? So I don't.
But there's something that's very urbanized now too, right?
Maybe
Anyway, so I do hope everyone you enjoy. I think Danny's talk. I mean, he's very lively, very educational talk. And thank you very much. And thank you for Patrick for your contribution as well. And then we welcome you to our KE series. And then just for announcement, I think on the 27th of March, then we are going to have another KE the series. It's about the ADHD, just like us, we never stop. But it's about the children. And it is going to be shared by Professor Katie Sum, I think the professor in psychology. So do welcome, I think, to come. I think Hong Kong U, the Faculty of Social Science is always your home, right? So please come back. And then Pauline, you're over there. I mean, she is the faculty members, who look after the alumni matters. And then thank you for Mayor Zhang, and then who organize the things. So let's give a hand to all of them. And thank you again, okay? And have a good evening. Thank you.